Hey everybody, Big Toad here and welcome back to my studio. In this video we will cover the final changes to what I've done to this large 6-foot by 3-foot painting of an Idaho Butte and Foothills. We'll go over what I've done to finish this off and look at it in some detail in some areas and just talk through the final painting. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, I know it's been a little while since I posted a video, and that's because I was doing the finishing touches on this painting, and those touches were very random. And what I mean by that is there was no central theme to them, and I did them at random times. I kept the photo of the painting up on my computer monitor, a large computer monitor, so I could look at it, and throughout the days, while I was working on other things, I would keep that video, that image up and look for things to do. And when I'd see something that needed to be done, I would run down to my studio, make some edits and changes, and then I'll take another photo, walk away, and post that one up. And so sometimes I only went down and did 3 or 4 brush strokes, and other times I'd go down there intending to do just 3 or 4 brush strokes and stay for 15, 20 minutes. But typically they were very short sessions and none of them really substantiated a video of any kind. So let's just go ahead and walk through what I've done here. I think the first thing I want to point out is the chroma of the painting. The foreground here, the part with the big wide road, the fence and the close-up trees and sagebrush and rocks and flowers, that is the foreground. That's the highest chroma. And that stands out because of the highest chroma. That gives me that chroma feel and look to it that makes it pop out as the most important layer of the painting. The higher chroma also pulls it to the foreground very clearly. Now the midground was a little bit of a challenge in this painting because I needed it to carry its own weight as part of the painting, but I needed to set it back a little bit. So the chroma overall has been dropped to the midground, and it's not as dark as the background mountain and sky. So I spent more time on that during the last week than any other part of the painting. So let's go ahead and jump in and look at some of those things I did there to finalize that midground area. I think what's going to jump out most quickly is some unusual or different colors I used in the midground. I brought in more green into the grasses in the midground. You can see a little bit here between the brush and the line of trees. You can see it's spread about this section of the painting. Now, if I move over to the right a little bit, you can see more green on the foothills here. And what's good about this is you can see a differentiation between 2 different layers of the midground. We've got the midground that's forward and the midground that's back. The midground that's forward has slightly higher chroma than the midground that's behind it. The colors in that section of the midground are just a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more chroma, and the ones in the hills behind it are a little more subtle. Some of the same colors though. And the greens are a little stronger. I have some reds which are a little stronger, which are burnt sienna, and I was able to calm that down a little bit with some titanium white as well as Naples yellow. And so by bringing in those colors, I was able to bring some vibrancy, but not have it be more vibrant than the foreground. And so you can see the faded colors in the furthest background, just below the mountain. And the reds really added something to it in the greens. I just had to bring some of those colors in. And they're very, very small, no big, heavy brush strokes, no giant patches. It's not quite a broken color approach, but it does, these colors do fade in and out of each other around the midground. And getting this midground right and looking like it belonged was critical to the success of this painting. because the foreground was so vibrant and the background with the mountain and the sky had such energy from the storm and the mountain and the various colors I used there, which I'll talk about in a minute, that the midground could be lost. And so it required a lot of care and a lot of careful application of these colors, of the greens, of the reds, of various different types of greens and yellows, and bringing in some slightly higher spots of higher chroma, maybe where the sun's shining on the hills. Now, one of the things I also did was I reduced the size of the patches of sagebrush that I had in the midground. Some of them were quite large. And it's not that it's unusual to see very large sections of the hills covered in sagebrush. That is natural. But what it did, though, because the foreground was not set in that environment, those sagebrush just didn't seem to fit well. The larger patches of sagebrush just seemed to be too much in the midground, and so by just putting smaller clumps of sagebrush that might represent 2 or 3 or 4 sagebrush clumped together, or maybe even one in the midground, it softened it and allowed the colors that I added to call attention to it rather than the big clumps that were just felt a little clumsy. So I took and painted out a lot of the larger sections of sagebrush in the midground itself, which I think really helped. Now, I did an entire video on the sky, so I'm not going to really talk too much about that because I really never touched it after that video. It just worked really well to set the stage for the rest of my painting. The storm coming in from the left side, and as if it's coming down the mountain down, and that runs the left would be north in the actual world, and then the lighter colors on the right hand side. So it really added some drama, and it just really set the painting off, I think, that sky. In doing that, I needed to bring some darker colors into the mountain, and there's several things I did there, and I talked a little bit about it maybe in another video, but let's go ahead and zoom in a couple spots and really talk through what I've done. Now, for the mountain, it's really dark in the photos. It's really a subdued mountain, except for the snow that was on the mountain. But I needed to create some more vitality and bring in a little bit more drama into the mountain itself. And so you'll see a variety of colors I've introduced here. If you go up to the peaks of the snow, you'll see it most prominent. I brought in some cobalt blue and just put little hints of that cobalt blue within some of the snow. And you'll also be able to come down into the mountain itself and see where I've used some cobalt blue to put little highlights into the mountain. Using and re-emphasizing with some of the white, the titanium white, which I also thinned down a little bit with Naples yellow in some places and maybe some cobalt blue in others. I was able to emphasize some of the ridge tops as they ran down the mountain. And so I made them stand out a little more prominently, and was able to use some of that snow to create slopes coming down the mountain as well, in the illusion of slopes. I also brought in some alizarin crimson with some cobalt blue, and brought in some purples, and put those purples in there to bring in some highlights and some variety, some darkness, and yet brightness to the mountain itself. I mixed in some cobalt blue with titanium white and put some little strokes in there, again emphasizing the slope of the mountain as well. I also used some ultramarine blue in here as well, again softened and brought down with the titanium white as well. I tried to keep the chromas low, so I would introduce some alizarin crimson and Naples yellow into those blues to keep the chromas down in some places. I do have spots of blue where the chroma's a little higher, just to add little pops here and there. But I try not to overwhelm with high chroma, just a variety of color. And I use darker colors back there because the mountain really does loom pretty darkly, unless the sun's hitting it face on, and it just wasn't. It's just not during the time of day of this painting. And I use the same thoughts with that alizarin crimson, trying to keep the chroma down, but I still put that kind of purplish mauve type color throughout the mountain to bring some warmth into it, to counter some of the coolness brought in by the ultramarine blue and cobalt blue I use as well. And again, I think that a variety of color in the brush strokes, always trying to maintain the slopes of the hills and the mountains, and the crevasses within the mountain itself. That's another thing, which is a little bit subtle, which you may be able to notice, that as I came from left, where it's darker skied, I tried to make the mountain a little more dark on the left end than I did on the right end of the mountain. And I think here you can see it's a little lighter. I used a little more of the cobalt and titanium white mixture to lighten those hills up a little bit, make them a little lighter. And again, to create that illusion that the storm was coming from the north, therefore the hills were darker in the north than the south, where the storm hadn't reached yet. So you'll see a transition over the overall mountain. Now, another thing I've done on the mountain is I've taken some Naples yellow and I've brought the chroma down and I've introduced it into the base of the mountain, as if there may be some grasses growing up at the base of the mountain that are just barely visible. And so you'll see that along the bottom, kind of helping with the transition, so it wasn't a harsh transition from the grass into the mountain itself. Another thing I needed to do in that transition from the mid-ground, that far mid-ground into the mountain, is I made those edges soft and blurry. I didn't want very many harsh lines. There are a couple of places where I allowed more structured line to show between the mountain and the mid-ground, but I tried to keep that as fuzzy as possible, as broken up or hazy as possible, because that's how objects look in the distance like that. They're gonna feel fuzzy and blend together in a smooth transition, often in many places. So it's important to keep that in mind, both soft edges and hard edges. But the further something is away, the more soft edges you're going to see, and the fewer hard edges and the less precise those hard edges will look. So I think you'll see between the soft edges that I created and the Naples yellow that's creeping up the hills of the mountain, you'll see where those two kind of blend together. And in some places it's difficult to define where the mountain begins and the foreground ends and such, and that's the effect you're looking for. I may have covered the foreground pretty well in previous videos. Let's go ahead and talk through a few things here, though. In the road, I put in some stones, some rocks that are kind of that reddish, brownish color that I have the other big rocks, which is not uncommon up in the hills there. I left the road kind of with that dirty red look to it, which again is not unusual of a color. I allowed it to be vibrant, bring it alive a little bit. I wasn't trying for total realism as much as I was for an impression of the mountain and its vibrancy. So you'll see those rocks scattered along the road in the middle, down each side, and I put some grasses tufting up and growing around them, as you can see. I did a video on the flowers and how I painted those in. They were really simple. So I'm not going to go into too much detail around that, but I did add more flowers to the foreground. Some of those flowers are a little different in that I tucked them into the shadow of the trees. And so it may be a little bit difficult here to see, but for the flowers that are within the shadow, that darker band underneath that tree, I used a little bit of blue in the white titanium to give it a bluish hue to it, to make it seem more shadowy. So cooled it down a little bit with the blue, made it feel a little darker, like it's in the shadow. Otherwise, I created the flowers the same way. And I scattered little patches of flowers throughout the foreground. but I did not want to put too many out there. So I had to be careful. Flowers are fun and they're pretty, and but you can overwhelm your picture pretty quickly. And I did not want to make too many flowers, just enough to add that flair to the painting is what I was after. A couple other things I want to show you. I want to go up to the patch of trees in the foreground on the right. And this is an example of something you could do and should do in your paintings. You see all the shadows I have coming off the trees. The mistake is, though, the painter forgets that there may be more trees off screen, outside of the painting. And so what I've done here is on this right edge, I brought in shadows as if there's more trees off panel, off the painting. If all my shadows stopped, it would tell everybody, oh, this is the end of the trees. But I was able to pretend that there were more trees outside of the painting and bring those shadows over. And I could have even done more, and maybe I should have brought some more shadows down the painting in front of this lowest tree to really emphasize that darkness. But what that dark does on the edge is it kind of holds the eye in, and it adds some realism. And in a wide open bright painting like this, it was nice to bring in those dark shadows. So bringing in extra shadows on the edge, I think was really worth it. And it's something you need to think about, is the effects of objects outside of your painting when it comes to shadows. I also want to go down and look at the bottom corners of the painting. I talked about this bottom right corner in an earlier video as well. You see that dark I have down there, as if there's shadow there coming in from the side as well. I did break it up with some strokes for grasses, which look nice. It's not a solid dark, but it's got that dark. Again, it says that there's something outside of my painting that's causing this shadow. And that shadow runs over towards the road, which makes it feel really natural and really ties the bottom of that painting together. And it just keeps your eye in above that. And I want to point out that the grasses, the little shades of yellow coming up from the bottom, serve to break up that darkness so it doesn't feel like just it's overwhelming that, but it fits in really nice. Now let's go over to the left corner. Now the left corner is a little different. And I'm doing it this way because there would be more light on this side of the road because it's the hill face that's facing towards the sun. The sun's coming from the sky on the right, so it's going to hit this a little more directly. So you don't see as much dark banding across and hitting the road. So that's why I did that. Also, the dark is broken up a little heavier by the yellow strokes of grasses coming up through there. And nothing fancy. I used that big number 10 filbert brush to just sweep up and bring those colors up in there. It really has that loose, natural feel to the brush, confident brush strokes. And so I was able to bring that up in there. So a little less, smaller patch of dark, a little more yellow in that, a little less overpowering the dark. I've subdued it quite a bit that way. That's also the corner where I eventually will sign and my name in there for the painting. I just haven't done it yet when I took this photo. Now let's travel our eye up the left side of this. And so this painting, as we come from that dark corner we just talked about, we come and we're just barely on the edge of that dark, nice fence post, and we hit the tree, we follow the tree up, and then we hit the sky. And that's all designed on purpose to hold the eye in. So let's look now at the sky. Now, obviously, I spent some time on a video talking about the sky and how I painted it. I've even mentioned it already in this painting. But now let's look at it from a boundary. I use that dark sky up there to continue that darkness that comes from the very bottom corner up the edge with the fence post, up into the tree, which kind of creates a barrier to hold the eye in, and then into the nice dark sky that goes up into the corner. And that gives us some, up in that corner, obviously we have some nice broken color. We have various dark colors. We have little hints of alizarin crimson, little hits of titanium white, some cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, all these nice, dark, deep, rich colors to hold your eye in and create that illusion of a storm coming in. And so that storm coming in from the side really also is a barrier for your eye to keep your eye from going off the page. Because when you look at that sky, you might go over to the edge and see the darkness, but you want to follow it back in to the lighter colors. And you can see here I have a small patch of just that's really a hint of the cobalt blue that really lightens it up on the top edge of that, and it pulls your eye over to it away from that corner. So it's all designed to pull you in from that corner. Let's go over to the other side and I'll show you what the purpose of that was and how that was thought through. So again, I've talked about the sky and how it goes from dark on the left to light, but I want to point out a couple things here. Here you see kind of mid-screen right now, there's that white that has hints of the Naples yellow, kind of like the sun is glowing, like we're getting a little glow reflected off of those lighter, more white clouds that don't have the moisture content of the storm clouds coming in from the north. And we see hints right on the edge above the trees here, right on the edge, we see hints of a lighter blue with some darker blue. And it's kind of a broken color looking. We bring in, so as if off to the edge, there's a blue sky maybe still existing out there, and the storm is pushing into that blue sky. But just a hint of that. Again, it gives that corner some life, and it gives that corner that's in the painting something new and different to look at that you don't find anywhere else in the painting. And again, it doesn't so much, there's not a darkness or something to hold your eye in, but the light color holds your eye there, because it's contrasted against the white and the rest of the sky. That little bit of blue, when your eye goes there, it doesn't want to leave, because that's telling another story. And what is it? What's on the other side? What's just off the painting? A brilliant blue sky, more clouds. So it holds you there for interest, not as a blockage like the darker colors often do. So it was all thought through with purpose, how I designed the corners and what their purpose was in holding the eye from dropping off the painting and bringing you back towards the center of the painting, the middle of the painting a little more. So as I talked through those corners and the edges and what I was trying to achieve and how I wanted to hold the eye in the painting, that was my goal. I think I've done that pretty well. In some places, better in others, maybe not quite, but that was my goal. So at least I had purpose in my paint strokes, purpose in my colors, purpose in my design, rather than just randomly throwing a bunch of trees and fence posts and a mountain in the picture. The colors themselves and how you lay it out with purpose, that's composition. And if you try to get lucky with composition, you'll fail more than you succeed. Now, what I did also, which you can't see, just as a note, the edges of the painting are about 3/4, 7/8 of an inch thick, and I painted those black. Such a large painting, 6 foot by 3 foot, we felt that a frame may take away or may make it feel too bulky on the wall. So we'll see. We're going to hang it the way it is with the black edges, and then think about maybe putting a small trim of black around it for a frame if that's necessary. But we'll hang it and look at it first before we make that decision. So that brings us to the end of this painting series. I may follow up with another short a session where we hang the painting and show it in the home and how it looks hanging on the wall. I may do something like that as well. We'll see. It's going to be a few weeks, a month before it gets hung. I got to let it dry, and then I got to seal it before we do that. But I'll get to it. And so this has been an exciting, a fun painting to do, that impressionistic landscape. I'm not looking for realism. I want the impression of what I see and feel when I'm out in these mountains. And I see and feel the vibrancy, even when maybe other people don't. I see and feel the ruggedness and the storms in the mountains. The sky is so powerful, and I think I've captured that. And the sagebrush and the trees and so it's an impressionistic landscape. I would never call myself a realist when my painting style. I don't want to be that real. It's not fun. This was fun to pull this together. It's been a great adventure, and I hope you enjoyed the videos. I hope maybe that along the way, not only to be entertained, maybe you've also learned something if you're also a painter. In both cases, I wish you well, and thanks for watching this series on the Idaho Butte and Foothills. And with that said, this is the Big Toad, and I am out.